What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 148 of the DFS Dose podcast, your fix of daily fantasy sports information, strategy, and analysis. I'm your host, Ben Halver, joined as I always am by Joey Carrion. And on today's show, we conclude our journey through my 2021 best ball positional tiers for tournaments. And we are joined today by a man who is undeniably on the Mount Rushmore of best ball analysts, the only repeat guest we've ever had, making his third appearance on the DFS Dose, friend of the show, friend in our hearts, James Brimacombe. Welcome to the show, sir. It's great to have you on once again.
Yeah, thanks, Ben and Joey. It's always a pleasure. You guys do good work, so I'm always happy to come on anytime. Twice a year, man. That sounds great.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. And look, guys, I would love to chit chat, but we don't have time for it because in this final episode of our 4-part series, we're tackling the wide receiver position and by far the deepest position, the most players we got to get to. So we're going to get right into it. If you guys care to, you can find the first 3 episodes of this series on our YouTube channel as well as in audio form on whatever podcast platform you use, whether that be Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or Podcast Addict. We talked quarterbacks with High-Low FF, tight ends with Todd from PA, and running backs with Establish the Runs Jack Miller. If you're new to the podcast, like what you hear, you can support us for free by liking this video and subscribing to the channel, as well as subscribing on whatever podcast platform you use. Free, simple, and easy. Gentlemen, let's get right into it. And starting off with tier 1 of my wide receivers, we've got 6 players in this tier, a tier that we've sort of labeled as elite, realistic wide receiver 1 overall upside for the 2021 season. Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, and Devontae Adams. James, I'll start with you. And starting off with Tyreek Hill, do you believe that he belongs in this tier with other players, or is he in a tier of his own, sort of the same way we regard Christian McCaffrey as the consensus RB1?
I would say he's definitely the top wide receiver in my rankings. He can do so much in best ball, regular fantasy, any kind of fantasy. He is the player. He can go off any week. So he is definitely my top target. So, yeah, if you want to put him ahead of in a tier by himself, that's fine. I also think there's some of these other guys are just they're great as well. So it's, yeah, I would probably keep him in the same tier, but he's definitely wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I just don't know how many other players in the league, if any other players in the league, have the upside to go 7 for 203 and 2 1/4 like we saw him do in week 12 last year.
Right.
God, I hope we were all rostering him on DraftKings that week.
I think I was. I don't know if you were. I don't know if you did.
I don't think I did. I don't think I did. So the main thing with this tier, I think, is that we believe these players, or I believe these players, have realistic paths to being the wide receiver 1 overall. Besides Tyreek Hill, James, who do you think has sort of the second best chance to do so?
I'm just going to bet on offenses this year. So I like Diggs and I like Hopkins and Adams. If Rodgers is there, Adams is the number 2 wide receiver for me. If he's not there, he's still like wide receiver 3, 4. So I still want to. And you can get him at a discount right now, so I don't mind that. Adams, I'd probably put a DK down 1 tier. I kind of have him in a different tier, but Calvin Ridley as well. Like, I don't think you can go wrong. Situation right now there is, yeah, he could go nuts, and especially in that division, they're going to need to score points. Do we really think Mike Davis is running back 1? So Ridley could be elite. He could take over. So. I like all those guys. I'm not going to say don't draft any of them.
Yeah, to me, the reason I've got Ridley at 2 here, and with the tiers, it's subjective. Like, the gaps are very small for me. But Ridley, I just think he has the best chance potentially in this entire group to lead the NFL in targets.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that, and I would probably have him as my wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 as you do. And it's just the opportunity. There's nobody else in that Falcons offense besides Kyle Pitts that's going to command a lot of touches. And, I mean, we've talked about it plenty over the last month or two, but the Falcons did nothing to address the defensive side of the ball. They're going to be horrible. Teams in their division got better. So they're going to be losing a lot of games, and this is a team that we've seen over the last couple of years be top 5, top 3 in terms of pass attempts per game. Now, that could change with Arthur Smith, but personally, I'm not a believer in Mike Davis this year, so I think they're still going to have to pass the ball a ton, and Calvin Ridley is going to be an absolute smash. That is a wide receiver 5 ADP on Underdog right now.
Joey, I know that you disagree with Devontae Adams being at the bottom of this tier. Do you wanna make the cases as to why he should be higher?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I understand why you have him at the bottom. Touchdown regression, obviously the Aaron Rodgers situation isn't resolved at this point, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think Rodgers plays for the Packers in 2021. So I'll be drafting a lot of Devonte Adams. He's going what as the wide receiver 3. He was going as a wide receiver 2 a couple months ago, so not a slight dip, but you could still get him in the second round in best ball drafts. And him and Rodgers just have one of the best connections in the NFL. He's been a career touchdown scorer, and it's kind of not similar with the Falcons, but to me it is. Like there's really nobody else there that like I'm truly scared of getting touches. Like MVS is average. Alan Lazard is all right. I know that's your boy Ben. Robert Tunyon, I mean, he averaged what like 4 targets per game last year. There's really nobody else there that I'm afraid of besides like Aaron Jones, but he's a running back, so I don't know. I would have Devontae above DK at least, and probably D Hop, but it's close.
For me, the justification of him being lower is that if you agree with the premise that these players have wide receiver 1 range, wide receiver 1 overall in their range, and we think that that's the reward of drafting Devontae Adams is that he could be the wide receiver 1 overall. What is the risk though? None of these other guys have the risk of their quarterback sitting out. That's exclusively a Devontae Adams thing. So, Joey and I have talked about it, and like he said, he believes Rodgers plays, and I believe Rodgers plays too, but our confidence level is very different in that. Joey said 99%, 90% that Rodgers plays with the Packers. I mean, I feel no more confident than 55, 56%. Yeah, I don't know, James, how do you feel about it?
I just the thing I love about Adams, so it's completely different situation than Tyreek, right? So Tyreek's got the quarterback. Tyreek has 80-yard touchdown anytime he's on the field potential, but Adams also, you just look at those 1-yard touchdowns. So I mean, even if it's Jordan Love, I think Adams is still he's still going to get double-digit touchdowns, and that's kind of how I view him. So I think right now he's slipping to the kind of the mid-second, sometimes late second, and I think that is a great. You get your running back in the first round, and then you go Adams in the second round, and that's a great start.
I agree with that. Let's move into our second tier. Players that I believe have top 5 in terms of what their potential ceilings could be. Justin Jefferson, Michael Thomas, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, and Allen Robinson. Now, in terms of ADP, I think the market would suggest that Justin Jefferson belongs in the tier above. He's going neck and neck with DK Metcalf and Calvin Ridley. How do you feel about JJ this year, James, coming off of a historic rookie season?
Yeah, that's all baked in with his ADP right now. It's an incredible rookie season. I kind of think he's in tier 2 myself. I kind of view him with DK Metcalf and even AJ Brown. I put those 3 kind of together. So I have them ranked right beside each other. If I miss on one, I'll take the second. If I miss on the second, I take the third. So that's the beauty of when you rank in tiers, you get those similar players, but Jefferson could explode. Yeah, he could be top 5. He could be top 3. He could be top receiver on the year. So any of these guys we're talking about have that potential.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree, and that's a point that I wanted to make is if you have DK Metcalf in tier 1, I think him and Justin Jefferson are in very similar situations just in terms of their offenses and potential target share. So if I was doing it, I would have both of them in the same tier. So either tier 1 or tier 2, however you feel fit. I don't think it's correct to have one in tier 1 and one in tier 2.
I totally get that, and I hear what you're saying about them being in similar situations. To me, the slight difference, and it's a very marginal difference, is that I think Adam Thielen is more likely to siphon touchdowns away from Justin Jefferson than anybody in Seattle's offense is. And I also think that Russell Wilson's ceiling is quite a bit higher than Kirk Cousins, which I think translates slightly over to DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fair argument, but I just think the opportunity will be there for Justin Jefferson, and he still scored what, 6 touchdowns last year, 7 touchdowns.
Mhm.
Adam Thielen scored 14, but he is getting older. He's getting to that point where he's 31 now, and the reins have been shifted over to Justin Jefferson, and he should be Kirk Cousins' go-to target. And I don't have it pulled up, but how many touchdowns did DK Metcalf score? Did Tyler Lockett score more touchdowns than DK Metcalf?
Lockett had like 4 in 1 week, so
Yeah,
it's kinda,
he had the monster game.
Yeah,
Metcalf had 10 though.
10. Yeah. So I don't know. I think they're both very, very similar. Justin Jefferson averaged 17.1 points per game last year in PPR. DK averaged 17. Like it's hard to put these guys apart. I mean,
Mhm.
like James mentioned, them two and AJ Brown are like very, very close together in my opinion.
Well, let's talk about AJ Brown. I mean, James, you mentioned him as being sort of the third guy in your tier along with Metcalf and JJ. Do you have Brown ranked above the rest of the players I have in this tier?
I do. Yeah, I have him over Michael Thomas, Lamb, Allen, Cooper, Robinson. I have him
Mm.
over all those guys. Just, I mean, if they didn't sign Julio, he was everyone's wide receiver, like right up there with Tyreek.
Mhm.
That's how high he was. So uh, I don't know. Tennessee's interesting this year because they're not typically a passing team, but now you have so many weapons there for Tannehill, so it's kind of interesting.
Now, I don't disagree with that, and I think on a weekly basis, his ceiling is largely unaffected. So, especially in formats like Underdog and DraftKings with playoffs, where those single weeks could be a lot bigger. But on drafters, I'm not sure. I don't think that he really does have top 5 wide receiver potential. I mean, I had him as my wide receiver 4 prior to the Julio signing, and I know dropping him down all the way to 14 in tier 3 is extreme. A lot of people didn't move him that much, but to me, the thing that was putting AJ Brown in that tier was the amount of targets and the potential that his targets could expand massively with the departures of Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, and Adam Humphries. I don't think that's really a possibility anymore with Julio Jones, Ferkser, and Josh Reynolds basically being 1-for-1 replacements of those 3 players. I don't see Brown's targets really expanding from the 7.5 that he saw last year. And to me, if you're going to be averaging 7.5 targets per game on a run first team, I don't know. I can't justify that in the second round anymore.
That's a fair point. He also his targets could be more productive. Like he could be getting better targets. Say he only gets 6.5 targets this year, so he's losing a target. Julio is opening up things for him. So I know what you're saying though. So
be hard to be more efficient than he already was. He was already one of the most efficient wide receivers in the league. Let's talk about another player who's had efficiency at times, maybe not so much last year, and that's Michael Thomas. It's pretty stark, the drop off that he had last year in terms of production. I know he was hurt for a stretch, but he went from being the wide receiver 1 in points per game in 2019 to being the wide receiver 41 in points per game in 2019. So, James, which of the 2 years do you think was an anomaly for Thomas?
I don't. He's one of the toughest questions to ask yourself this year. I would kind of play it safe and just take the middle. If you're maybe a little bit higher on his breakout year than last year, so maybe like 75% on that side of it. So I think if you go running back to start out, I don't hate going Michael Thomas 3rd round because that's. Typically, you look at last year, everyone was kind of down on Stephon Diggs going to Buffalo. They don't pass. Josh Allen's just going to rush all the touchdowns. And Diggs just had this monster year. And I think he was going 4th or 5th round, Diggs. So Michael Thomas, obviously you're going to have to pay a little extra for that. But people are definitely down on him. And it could pay off for you if you want to take a shot on it. I would rather have him in the 4th round, but I don't think that's ever going to happen this year.
Yeah. Joey, what are your thoughts on Michael Thomas?
I think that Michael Thomas is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL, just from a raw talent perspective, and he's been very productive in his career ever since he's came into the NFL. Besides 2020, he went over 1,000+ receiving yards in every single year of his career, over 120+ targets in every single season in his career. Besides 2020, obviously. So you know what Michael Thomas can do if he stays healthy. Obviously, 2020 he got hurt. Breeze was hurt too. So couple of obstacles last year. I do still think that he's a talented player, but we have to look at the situation. Obviously, there's that quarterback controversy between Winston and Taysom Hill, and I think to have Michael Thomas in this tier, you would need Winston to start 17 games, and I don't know if he will. So I personally wouldn't have him in a top 5 upside tier. I would probably put him down at the top of tier 4, like confident wide receivers 2s, just because of that uncertainty at the quarterback position. So that's kind of how I'm viewing Michael Thomas. I don't have many shares, and I think I would rather have probably like the 5 or 6 guys below him in your tiers.
Just offering a little pushback. I think it's hard to say that he doesn't have top 5 upside coming off of, being only 2 years removed from being the wide receiver 1 overall. And I mean, if Jameis Winston starts 17 games, I think that he's probably a upgrade on what 2019 Drew Brees was. So I don't know. I don't think we can say he doesn't have top 5 upside.
Yeah, but I mean, he as a player he does, but you have to look at the situation. Is Jameis really going to start 17 games? We don't know that at this point.
No,
We saw last year that Taysom was the guy when Breeze was out. It wasn't Jameis. It was Taysom Hill, and they still paid him. I know the contract was kind of fugazi, but they still paid him prior to that fake contract. So we really don't know, and it's kind of a similar situation to Green Bay, in my opinion, where you bump down Devontae Adams, but you're not bumping down Michael Thomas. So that's kind of where there's a little disconnect, in my opinion. Because if you're keeping Michael Thomas in the top 5 upside tier, then like I said, it's pretty similar to Devontae Adams, but you have him bumped down.
That's definitely a fair perspective. I mean, I guess the final word I would say on that is that I think Thomas is already bumped down being at 8. I think that if we knew for sure Jameis Winston was starting 17, I would put him in tier 1.
Yeah, I would add one more thing on Thomas. Just look at the Saints depth chart. You got Traquan Smith again. They're still giving another go to. Then you got Callaway and Deontay Harris. Like, their depth chart is not great. So, and then you got Troutman. I know your guys' opinion on that. So, there's going to be targets there for him, massive targets. So
definitely a lot of targets. It's just with Michael Thomas, you need a massive target season for him to reach that top 5 status. You need him to get 185 targets, which he did in 2019, to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall, because you know that he's not scoring deep touchdowns at the rate that Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs are. So the ceiling is kind of capped there, but he could definitely get there on volume.
Let's move on to the third tier of players here. And the margin of difference between tier 2 and tier 3 for me is very slight. It's the difference between someone I think has top 5 upside versus top 10. And this tier of guys I think have a top 10 ceiling. It's Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, and Chris Godwin. Gentlemen, what names stand out to you in this group?
Everyone always says that the wide receivers are so that these are the rounds you want them, right? So once you hit, you want to build off your best ball teams with these kind of wide receivers, but they're all kind of the same to me. So I like them all. I guess all these names in this tier, the one that I would question would be the rookie Chase, because I feel like we are chasing that Jefferson season from last year. But the problem I have with that, Jefferson was a 12th round pick last year and people are taking him. So now if you want to take Chase, it's going to cost you a 4th round pick, which is pretty steep in my opinion, especially the situation with Cincinnati right now. They have weapons on offense, every position. So I don't know how much volume he's going to get, especially as a rookie. So I would say we're not. Maybe if we get 70% of what Jefferson did last year, that would be a huge win for him. But I'm thinking more along the lines like 50 to 60% of what Jefferson did for Chase. And I haven't been paying for that price for him this year, which could be a huge regret later in the season.
Joey, give me your thoughts on Jamar Chase. I know that, early in the best ball season pre-draft when he was in the 7th round, you were basically taking him every trip. But now that you have to pay a fringe 4th, 5th round price tag for him, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I love Chase. I love him as a player, as a talent. And he probably comes in and is the most talented wide receiver on the Bengals offense. But like James mentioned, there are a lot of players there, and they're very talented players. T. Higgins is going into his 2nd year. They still have Tyler Boyd, who is productive. Joe Mixon, they've been talking up the entire offseason, saying that he's going to get more touches, more receiving work. So it's just a tough situation to gauge. I think he's going as the wide receiver 20 on underdog right now, which is fine. It's a back end wide receiver 2. And I think that's probably most likely where he finishes, is a wide receiver 2. I don't think he'll have the crazy opportunity to be able to finish inside the top 10. And if he doesn't have the opportunity, he'll have to be really efficient with his touches. And I don't know if he can, especially in the Bengals offense. I mean, it's just so hard to bet on bad teams, but they have a lot of talent. Burrow's coming back off of his injury. I don't know. I feel like it's just too expensive right now to buy Chase.
I hear those arguments, and if we're talking about best ball like cash games, I would not have him in this tier whatsoever. But when I'm prioritizing upside, I absolutely think the opportunity's there. We saw Joe Burrow average 40 attempts per game in his 10 starts, and I think he comes in and is immediately the wide receiver 1. Despite not having played a snap in the NFL, he comes in and has the most chemistry with Joe Burrow because of what they did in college together. So, Jamar Chase, he has the talent, he has the chemistry with the quarterback, and there should be enough pass volume for him to get there. I'm all aboard Jamar Chase this year, but I could see the cases against him. I think he definitely has the most downside of anybody in this group.
Yeah. I mean, I love Chase in the 7th round, as you mentioned. It's just hard to put him in this tier with, guys like A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, wide receivers that have shown already that they could do it, are proven assets, and I think they have comparable ceilings. So, like I said, he's probably in the tier below for me. I think he's a wide receiver 2, but he'll definitely have spike weeks here and there. I'm just more concerned about Cincinnati as an offense in general, because it's just hard to bet on bad teams. I don't think Zach Taylor is that great of a head coach. They didn't address the offensive line. So, meanwhile, Joe Burrow, he was slinging the rock last year. He didn't have many good fantasy games. So, if the quarterback isn't having many good fantasy games, it's hard for the wide receivers to have, great fantasy games.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's transition into tier 4 here, a group of confident wide receiver 2s, high-end wide receiver 3s, if you're able to land them in that spot on your best ball rosters. Odell Beckham Jr., Julio Jones, both Rams receivers, and Kupp and Woods. Got Higgins here, DJ Chark, DJ Moore, Kenny Golladay, Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, and Robbie Anderson. Gentlemen, I'll let you take it in whatever direction you want, James.
Yeah, the names that stand out to me are Julio Jones and DJ Moore. Those are 2 guys I'm higher on than most, maybe heading into this year, especially DJ Moore. I'm going to keep drafting him every year, kind of see him a little bit higher. I like Beckham. I think if you can get him, land him as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, it's like a great spot for a rebound season. T. Higgins, have no problem with. So I would say DJ Shark, I would drop down to another tier. As far as these other names, kind of like them all. Thielen, I'd rather let other people draft him, but if I get him at value, I don't mind it. Galladay is kind of the same. I'm kind of letting him slip a little bit. But all these other names I'm fine with. The Rams receivers, I'm not really sure which way to go. So it's usually I'm not reaching for either one of them. But if one falls to me, when some of these other names I like a little bit better, that's kind of how I value them. So I'm not getting crazy amounts of shares of the Rams guys.
Yeah, for me, it's really difficult to differentiate which of those guys should be the priority between Woods and Cup. And Woods is pretty consistently going higher, especially on full PPR sites. So I've ended up with quite a bit more Cooper Cup. And the other note I want to say, just sort of a general note, is that while I have Odell Beckham at the top of this tier, it's not where I'm drafting him because, his ADP is actually probably the lowest in this group. Maybe he's above Robbie Anderson at the bottom, but, his ADP is below just about everybody else in this tier. So he is going to be one of my most owned players because I value him higher or in comparison to these guys, but you don't have to take him there. So he's a guy that I'm drafting a ton of at, the back end of the 6th, early 7th. Joey, who are some names that stand out to you? I know that you're higher on DJ Chark, I think, than James.
Yeah, I think I am. I just like DJ Chark as a player. I like his athletic profile. He's very fast. He has, great agility, great burst. He just has the prototypical build of an alpha wide receiver 1 in the NFL, 6'3", 200. I just think he's a great all-around wide receiver, and he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville. I know there's a lot of steam behind Laviska Shenault, wide receiver 1 season. I don't know if I'm ready to give the edge to him over Chark, just because Chark has proven to be a capable wide receiver in the NFL. Sophomore year, he went over 1,000 yards on 118 targets, scored 8 touchdowns with terrible quarterback play. So with Trevor Lawrence incoming, I think DJ Chark is primed for a great season, and he's going as the wide receiver 31, which is the second lowest wide receiver ADP in this tier behind Robbie Anderson. So I like DJ Chark, and you can get a high ceiling guy, I think, in the 7th, 8th round in best ball. So I love it.
Any other names in this tier that you guys want to hit on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Julio Jones is probably correct in this tier, but I do like him. We talked about A.J. Brown earlier. I think the only options in that Titans offense are A.J. Brown and Julio Jones in terms of the passing game. Like, I'm not worried about Anthony Ferkser. I'm not worried about Josh Reynolds. We know Derrick Henry isn't going to catch any passes. So it's the Julio Jones and A.J. Brown show. And if the Titans offense stays efficient like we've seen it in recent seasons, I think that Julio Jones could probably smash his ADP at wide receiver 16 on Underdog. And other than that, I think this is probably the most correct tier, in my opinion. And I'm drafting a lot of these guys, especially, in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, when I'm most likely fading running backs in that same range.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys had a chance to catch our running back episode with Jack Miller, we really hit on the running back dead zone and optimal drafting in terms of roster construction. And, this is the range where you want to be hitting these wide receivers hard. So I think that, that's probably the correct choice. James, I know that you like to get weird sometimes with roster construction. How do you feel about that sort of thought that's really becoming sort of mainstream, is that we need to smash wide receivers in this range?
Yeah, I mean they're all great names, and I'm not gonna be mad if if any of these guys are on my team. So I agree. Like I don't think there's one set way to draft a team. So that kind of gets me frustrated sometimes when people are pounding the table. You gotta do this roster construction and can't draft this position over this position. But yeah, there's a million different ways to draft. So the one thing I do think is a big deal that no one really talks about is how you find values on players. Just talking about the wide receivers in general. So it really comes down to how people view that player from the year before, any news that's come out on that player recently is going to affect where they fall in drafts. So you get Beckham. He had a bad year. He was injured last year, so now you got him in tier 4. And Galladay slipping because of that. You get the Pittsburgh wide receivers. You're finally starting to see a Pittsburgh receiver, and also when you have teams that have 2 or 3 really good receivers, they're getting pushed down the board some, which I don't think matters as much in best ball. So I think you can take the wide receiver 1, 2, or 3 on that team. That's kind of where I was a little bit out on DJ Shark, because I feel like they have LaVisca and they have Marvin Jones. So they have 3 guys, and to me, they're all kind of equal. And I would say the same in the next year. We're going to talk about the Miami guys. So there's 3 guys there, and to me, they're all the same. The third one that comes to me at value, that's the one I'm going to take. So I think a lot of people now in June, we hardly have any news. So any kind of news that comes out is going to push guys up and down the board when they probably should just kind of be staying where they are.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, we can transition into that tier 5, which I've got labeled as just the week winners tier. These are guys that I think are probably going to be relatively inconsistent on a week-to-week basis, but they can come in and just absolutely smash when they hit their upper percentile outcomes. And it's Devontae Smith, Chase Claypool, Michael Gallup, my son this year, Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, and Cortland Sutton. And let's start off with Devontae Smith. I mean, we've got the man known as Eagles on the podcast, so let's talk about the Eagles' first-round pick this year.
He's starting to get pretty hyped up, and it's probably only going to build once all the practices and training camps and everything start. Like, people are just the beat writers are going to be all over him, and he looks like the best Eagle out there, right? So he's going to continue to rise in ADP, kind of like Rager last year, right? We want a guy. They have no receivers. We want to put a guy there as the guy. So I think a lot of people are going to be doing that. Just how we've had rookie receivers last year just go off. So I think I don't mind him right now. I think he's a decent price, but I think in about a month he's going to be overpriced. So if you like him, get him now. I'm excited to see what he does, but I'm kind of off all the Eagles this year. I learned my lesson last year.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that take, because, again, it's just hard for me to think that this is going to be a team that's going to be passing the ball a lot, right? Like, I think it'll be definitely a run-first team, especially if Jalen Hurts continues the way that he did as the starter last year. So I just don't know. I think it'll be hard to predict which guy, and Jalen Reagor is getting some hype too this offseason as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Devontae Smith right now at ADP is probably a better buy than Jamar Chase if we're just looking at the rookies. Like we talked about, Jamar Chase was that 7th round wide receiver that I was smashing as a rookie. Now that's probably Devontae Smith. I mean, they really have nobody else there. Like, the opportunity is plentiful for Devontae Smith. They have Jalen Reagor, but I don't know how good he is. They have Dallas Goedert and pretty much nobody else. So I think him and Jalen Hurts can do some good things for the Eagles in 2021. So I like Devontae Smith a lot. He's going as the wide receiver 33 on Underdog right now. So I like buying him at that price. And honestly, he probably has a very good chance to finish as the rookie wide receiver 1 when the season is over.
I mean, calling Travis Fulgham nothing is a little disrespectful.
Man, that depth chart is so hard to look at times after those top 2 receivers.
Well, a depth chart that's not hard to look at is the Dallas Cowboys depth chart at wide receiver. When your wide receiver 3 is Michael Gallup, you're in a great spot. And to me, Michael Gallup is arguably the best value in drafts right now. James, what are your thoughts on Gallup this season?
Yeah, he's always the guy that people just forget, it feels like. I have no problems with him. He's been a staple of my drafts this will be the 3rd year going. But yeah, those are the kind of receivers you just want to build on. Those young guys, good offenses, potential to have great weeks for you. And then if the guys in front of them go down, I mean, you're in for a monster season. So I think it's a great bet. In this tier you have, I would put Claypool, then Gallup. That's kind of how I would go out of those guys you have. So those are the 2 that I think have the most upside and have great opportunities and just touchdown potential and you name it. So
Right. And you mentioned earlier about how, the last season, the perception of last season sort of really affects people more than maybe it should. And I think that that's clear cut the case with Michael Gallup. I mean, we were a year removed from Gallup being the wide receiver 18 in points per game in PPR, and also being essentially neck and neck with Amari Cooper in terms of production. And now Cooper is going, 4 or 5 rounds, higher than Michael Gallup. I don't know if that's deserved. Gallup is young. He's in a contract year, ran the second most routes of any wide receiver in the NFL last year. And if he does that again and his yards per catch is closer to what it was in 2019 when it was 16.8 and when he was putting up 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns, he's going to absolutely smash ADP. And I can't get enough of him. I was drafting him in the 9th round. I'll draft him in the 8th round. And if he gets up to the 7th, I'll still be taking him.
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, I mean, I like Gallup, and I like all of these players in these tiers because these are the guys that have crazy high ceilings. Will Fuller, I think, is a great buy too. We saw what he could do last year when he stayed healthy. He was a top 8 wide receiver in terms of points per game in PPR last year. So I love Will Fuller. I like Chase Claypool. I like Gallup. Waddle. I don't know about his ceiling just because there is a lot of competition for touches. So I don't really know about him personally. And then Cortland Sutton, I think is fine as well. Obviously torn ACL last year, but he was very productive in 2019. So I think this is a very solid tier.
Yeah, Sutton to me has the talent and potential opportunity to be in a tier above in the 4th tier. And that's actually where he's getting drafted, I would say, in terms of
Yes.
ADP is above all of these guys. But to me, it's just the Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater duo is god awful. I want almost no
terrible.
parts of that. And, we haven't really seen him in congruence with Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Jeudy, I know, some people have mixed thoughts on him, but he was regarded as one of the best wide receivers coming out last year. And, just with shaky quarterback play and uncertainty about who the true alpha is between the two of them, I'm a little skeptical about Sutton at ADP.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But I would say Sutton is in my opinion, Sutton is the wide receiver 1 for the Broncos, and Jeudy would be the wide receiver 2 if I had to put it.
I think that's the popular take. Let's transition into tier 6, which I think is sort of the inverse of the tier we just discussed. A bunch of guys with, potentially low floors but high ceilings. I think these are guys with low ceilings but very high floors. Tyler Boyd, Jarvis Landry, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Brandon Cooks. James, how do you handle these types of wide receivers in best ball where, maybe they're not going to be posting the ceiling games, but the consistency is likely, and they're likely going to outproduce this ranking in terms of where they finish at the end of the year?
I think these kind of players are key to your builds because nobody really wants them. They're not great names. But every week you look at week to week on their seasons, and you're gonna see some decent numbers. Like, oh man, if you didn't see the name compared to the numbers, I think that right there goes. Like, people want the young receivers, people want the better than wide receiver 1 on the team. But these are the kind of guys that you want to build when we talk about, those wide receivers. You want to build a huge core of wide receivers. I'm all right with all 4 of these kind of names. So I would say Brandon Cooks is a little bit of a discount right now. Like, Houston's so bad, but somebody needs to step up. They're going to be losing so many games, and maybe he just gets knocked out the first couple of weeks and he's hurt, and then it's a bunch of their cutie, and who knows who's catching balls at that point. But I kind of like Cooks at his cost right now. I think and these guys are typically going to be your wide receiver 5 on your team, I would say.
Yeah.
And they're going to fill in for bye weeks. They're going to be flex potential every week. And if the guys in front of them go down, you're getting more value. So I like them all.
Joey, Brandon Cooks thoughts. I know that you've had some thoughts about him in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Brandon Cooks because he's just a bitch. But I would tend to agree just with the thought of this tier, as these are guys that are high floors, and honestly, they'll probably compete to be in your best ball lineups every week. Like, they're not the sexy names, and I've probably undervalued these guys up to this point of the offseason as well. But just taking a look at ADP, I'll list them off for you guys. Tyler Boyd is the wide receiver 36. Juju is the wide receiver 37. And then we have Brandon Cooks as the wide receiver 42 and Jarvis Landry as the wide receiver 45. I mean, if you're just looking at the whole season, they're gonna 100% beat this ADP, 1,000,000%, just in terms of their wide receiver finishes. All four of them, I will 100% mark that down. Like they will, but do they have like the 25 point, 30 point ceilings that we want in best ball? They don't, but like James said, they can fill in for your bye weeks. They're your wide receiver fives, and they're going to be consistent. So we probably do undervalue these guys as fantasy football players and drafters.
A lot of the times for me, it comes down to the types of wide receivers that I've started my builds with. So if I have guys that I think have inconsistent floors but high ceilings, I've got a bunch of DJ Chark or Devontae Smith, Chase Claypool's, building the beginning of my team, then I'm definitely making a concerted effort to get these guys to sort of, balance out those players' low weeks. I think that's really important, especially in formats like Underdog and DraftKings with playoffs. And, you still do have to be in the top 2 of the league to advance. If I'm got a bunch of really consistent wide receivers, I start wide receiver, I get Hill and Diggs or something like that, or Adams and Diggs. I just don't know how frequently these guys are going to be topping those players. So I might be looking to transition, as we move past the running back dead zone back into taking shots on some guys, the Bucks running backs, Damian Harris, et cetera, in this ADP range. So to me, it's definitely a roster construction question, but like Joey said, these guys are clear-cut bets to outproduce their ADPs. Moving on to tier 7 and 8, and we can talk about them in congruence. I'm not going to list all the names because there's just way too many of them, but to me, the difference in these tiers are marginal. I'm looking at these as speculative shots, players with wide ranges of outcomes, and the only difference separating the two tiers to me is just how likely I think that they are to hit the upper percentile of their range. But we've got wide receivers 41 through 64 in this tier. So I mean, you guys can just hit on whatever names you really feel like stand out.
To me, this is kind of the wide receiver group that I really like to build upon. So I feel like even the ones earlier I do like. They're going to cost you a little bit more, but I love the names like Michael Pittman. You got the young receiver, could break out, could be. Who knows what Wentz is going to do, right? But you also get potential wide receiver 1 on that team. Could have a huge year. I love Mike Williams. I think he's starting to rise. People are talking about him. He's an early first-round pick that really has been fighting injuries and throughout his career. But now he has the quarterback and for a full season, so he could be a big breakout. Curtis Samuel. He's been pretty special last year, just what he accomplished, and now he's going to Washington, who everyone's excited about that team. So those are a few players in tier 7 that I really stand out to me. Some of those I kind of like Deebo Samuel as well. I just think 49ers, if Trey Lance is who everyone thinks he's going to be, that offense is going to be fun. You're going to want a piece of that. So he's an inexpensive way to get some of the 49ers. And then like Chenault, I'm fine with. Judy, I'm fine with, but also we go back to Denver. The quarterbacks are just devaluing those receivers. So it's kind of, I don't mind taking them. Hollywood Brown and Bateman. Baltimore is interesting. We could have Lamar just break out crazy season, and one of those guys could be the guy. But I've been on Hollywood Brown for a couple of years, so I've kind of been dropping him down a little bit. I don't mind drafting him, but I'm not going to overdraft him this year. So it's kind of how I feel about the tier 7 there. So I'm not sure what Joey thinks.
Joey?
I like these guys, but I don't really draft much of any of these players, honestly. I just don't really know about their ceilings. If I had to pick one guy that I think is a little lower than consensus, would probably be Deebo Samuel. I think you could have him in the tier above. Honestly, I think he's the clear-cut either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 on that Niners offense, and we've seen what he can do. Consistent, leader in the NFL in terms of yards after the catch, and he, forces missed tackles at one of the highest rates at wide receiver. So I like Deebo Samuel's talent, and I like the situation that he's in with the Niners offense. So that's a guy that I would probably have up. But other than that, I think this is, a pretty solid tier, and probably the biggest disagreement, or I don't want to say disagreement, but probably the guy that I would say you're lower on is probably Laviska Shenault after all of this off-season hype. I think people would have him in like the tier or two, a tier or two above this tier, honestly.
It's hard because I want to be high on Visca. I really do. So I don't know what to do with it. It's just, to me, I just have no idea what this offense is going to do. And I was buying Laviska a lot when he was going, his ADP was past 100. He was going in this range with Mike Williams and Pittman for a long time in the offseason and best ball drafts. And I was taking that value because I value him around these players clearly. But, now if he's going in the 8th round, like, God, I just don't know if I can stomach that with DJ Chark. And I think Travis Etienne's going to be heavily involved, especially in some of the ways that people wanted Laviska Shenault to be involved, and I just don't know if the reality is set in. Just hitting on Deebo Samuel there, you both mentioned him as someone that you're potentially higher on. I know that I'm way below in terms of where I have him ranked versus ADP. To me, it's just, I think that this team is going to remain a run-first team. Over the past 3 seasons, they finished 16th, 20th, and 31st in pass attempts per game. And, Joe, you called him the clear-cut, either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. I mean, I think that he's the clear-cut third option in the 49ers passing game behind Ayuk and behind George Kittle. And if it's going to be a low-volume passing attack, I just don't have that much interest in Deebo Samuel. I know he's a talented player, but his ADP is really the concern for me. He's going way too high.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but I think that the Niners, when he's healthy, manufacture touches to Deebo Samuel. They get crazy in how they give him touches with those little jet sweeps and screens out of the backfield. So I think that his and Brandon Ayuk's touch comparison is very similar. I don't think Ayuk's going to get like 50 more touches than Deebo Samuel. I think they'll be very close. So it's kind of hard to have Ayuk in tier 4 and then have Deebo Samuel in tier 7 when in reality, if they're both healthy, they'll probably both finish near each other in fantasy points if the offense is the concern and the volume.
Yep, that's definitely a fair point. James, we need to hear your Gabriel Davis take. I mean, Joey and I talk about this damn near every week, so both of our takes are well on record. I love Gabriel Davis. I mean, you could go as far as to call him this year's Darius Slayton for me, but James, tell me what you think about Gabriel Davis. I mean, I've got him quite a bit higher in terms of my rankings than where he's going in ADP.
Yeah, it's funny that people just want to talk about Cole Beasley there for a while before all this other news came out, and that he's the great value, and every year he puts up these massive points for you, and then everyone wants to talk about Sanders is coming to Buffalo. He's going to be tied to Josh Allen and blah, blah, blah. But how old is Sanders? He's pretty old. So.
Like 34. Old as dirt.
But then we want these young wide receivers and all these other teams, and we want to talk them up, and it's great value and could smash this year, could win your league. But nobody talks about Davis, which is crazy. He's on the Bills. He scored 7 touchdowns last year, which is crazy. I just think his ADP doesn't make sense to me. So I think he's a great, and I know you have him in this tier. I know I didn't mention him, but he's a value because you can get these players and then you can come back around later and get him. So
yes.
I think he's a guy you want to build around, especially for best ball. Like 7 touchdowns as a rookie, and then you got Sanders and all this Beasley drama going on, and Diggs. Like beside Diggs, he could get 10 touchdowns. I don't think that's out of possibility.
I think he absolutely could. I mean, he only had 1 less touchdown than Stephon Diggs, and he had 104 less targets. I mean, he had 3 more touchdowns than Cole Beasley on 45 less targets. I think Gabriel Davis is that dude. He earned playing time immediately. I know that John Brown missed time, but still, Davis played over 60% of snaps in 10 games. Like you said, like I have no concerns about Emmanuel Sanders. I'm sorry, I am not worried about that. This is a young man's game, and Gabriel Davis, touchdown scorer, 7th in the NFL in average target distance last year, and we know Josh Allen's got an absolute cannon. His yards per catch was 17.1, which is just absolutely elite. Average 9.7 yards per target. It's top 20 in the league, and he did it as a rookie. We know the volume's going to be there passing wise in this Bills offense. I mean, God, when he was a 14th round pick, I literally drafted him in every single draft. And now I've backed off just in terms of exposure, because if he gets hurt, I'm probably going to be bankrupt this year. But
no.
Yeah, I mean, solid arguments for Gabriel Davis, and he probably is in this tier. Like, I'm not disagreeing with the tier. There's just other players that I would rather have above him. And, I'll go to say, like, Emmanuel Sanders had more 20-point games last year than Gabriel Davis. On a worse offense. Drew Brees was hurt. So I just feel like there's a wide range of outcomes with Gabriel Davis. I mean, he only had 62 targets, and that'd be kind of hard not to beat, especially if he's on the field early in the season, because we kind of saw him come on late in the season. But this isn't a guy that's going to average more than 6 targets per game. I'm just sorry to burst your bubble here. As long as Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders are healthy and they're on the football field, Gabe Davis is not going to average more than 6 targets per game. So you're kind of hoping he gets there on those 2 or 3 deep shots, and we know that those are just like high variance throws, and obviously they could break right in his favor. They kind of did last year, but they could not. So I don't know. He's a guy that I've drafted some, but I'm not going too hard on him.
I got 2 more players in this group that I want to talk about. The first is Henry Ruggs. Gentlemen, are we completely out on Henry Ruggs?
Absolutely.
James?
I like him.
I like him too. Give us the case for Ruggs. I'm all about that Ruggs.
I just like any of how I draft out any of my players, it's all about value and opportunity. And I just think the Raiders, people, for some reason, they don't like the Raiders. So all their players just slip down the draft board. So Ruggs is just one of those. Obviously, people are looking at last season. He was a high draft pick, and he just hasn't proven anything yet. But he got Aguilar's out of there. They brought in, John Brown?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Ruggs could be their top guy, just like Aguilar put up numbers last year. So, and I just think he was kind of dinged up last year. So who knows what a healthy Ruggs can do in the offense. So you get the depth chart: Henry Ruggs, John Brown, Hunter Renfrow, Brian Edwards. Like, why couldn't Ruggs have a huge season? I don't understand why he's so low in ADP. So I'm buying him as wide receiver 5-6 on my team. So I think it's a great upside play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's only been a year since they drafted him as the first overall wide receiver in last year's draft. A draft that saw Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, and Jalen Reagor go in the first round.
That's just the Raiders being the Raiders, though. That's not an indication on Henry Ruggs' talent, because he was less talented than all of those guys. That's just the Raiders.
He was not less talented than Jalen Reagor.
I mean, coming out of the draft, a lot of people had Reagor above Henry Ruggs. But
yeah.
I mean, he's definitely less talented than CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Justin Jefferson, and that's just the Raiders being a terrible organization. That's not an indication on Henry Ruggs' talent.
I mean,
by any means, he's just a deep threat. He's literally just a deep threat. That's all he is. He's a burner. Okay, so he has that ceiling. If it hits, you're lit, right? Because he has that skill set like a Tyreek Hill, where he could take the top off a defense, score a touchdown anytime he touches the ball. But, Darren Waller is obviously the clear-cut alpha in that Raiders offense. And then you combine that with the fact that, Derek Carr doesn't really support many fantasy assets, and we've seen it over the course of his career. I don't even remember him supporting any clear-cut fantasy.
A year where he supported both Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper.
Oh, okay. So one season out of 7 or 8, and just the Raiders. I mean, they're just a train wreck. I want no part of their offense. They went out and drafted Josh Jacobs in the first round, and then they go out and sign Kenyon Drake to $10 million. So this is a team that I have no faith in to do the right thing and to get Henry Ruggs touches. So I mean he's in this tier for sure, but like no, like I don't care about Henry Ruggs. Like
you're basically calling him John Ross 2.0.
I mean it's not really. I don't know if it's him as a player. It's just a situation. Like Derek Carr, I would just feel like he doesn't really throw that many deep throws, and maybe that's just kind of like a thing with Henry Ruggs is we kind of look at him as a deep threat just because he's like a burner. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he's like a better all around wide receiver than I'm giving him credit for. But I don't know. I don't know about Henry Ruggs. I'll say that.
Last guy I want to hit on in this group is Paris Campbell. This is a guy who's been thoroughly derailed by injuries up to this point in his career, and I have him in tier 8 compared to where we had Michael Pittman. And James, made the point that Pittman could be the wide receiver 1 in Indy. I think that there is a chance that could be Paris Campbell as well, and you're getting him quite a bit later. I know we saw him be productive for 1 week, and T.Y. Hilton's still there, and Paris Campbell I think was originally drafted to be the T.Y. Hilton replacement. It just never really panned out, like I said, due to injuries. Joey, I know that you are a Paris Campbell believer as well.
Yeah, I've been a Paris Campbell believer over the last couple of seasons. He was drafted in the second round by the Colts.
Yes.
So I don't know. I like him as a player. I like his talent, but it's hard to buy him after him missing pretty much 2 full seasons in his career so far, and I don't know. I don't have many shares of Paris Campbell this year. Kind of staying away just in terms of the tier. Like I have more Traquan Smith, I have more Perryman, I have more Darnell Mooney than Paris Campbell.
That's fair. James, do you have any interest in Paris Campbell coming into year 3?
It's just kind of like Joey, and I don't usually think about what happened last year. I'm using that in my favor, but for some reason, Paris Campbell, I was so high on him the last couple of years, and I don't usually feel like I get burned by a player, so I'm not going to go back to him. But for some reason, I haven't been pulling the trigger on Campbell, and maybe it's because I do like Pittman, and I kind of like T.Y. Hilton too still, so that's probably why I'm a little bit off Campbell. So.
Interesting. Well, speaking of T.Y. Hilton, he is in my second to last tier as we close things up here in tier 9. This is sort of like the lower tier version of the tier we discussed earlier with Boyd, Landry, and Juju, but just guys that I think are a little bit lower on that scale as guys with, they're probably going to finish quite a bit higher than where I have them ranked, but I just don't know what the upside is. Sterling Shepard, Nelson Aguilar, Russell Gage, T.Y. Hilton, and at 69, Cole Beasley.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is, pretty much very similar to your tier 6. Just guys that are most likely going to outperform their ADP in terms of wide receiver finishes, but you just kind of don't really know what you're going to get out of them from a weekly basis. If I had to move one guy up, it would probably be Aguilar. The Patriots went out, made it a priority to sign him on the first or second day of free agency, gave him $20 million or $17 million. So I think he's going to be involved in the offense, and somebody has to catch passes for the Patriots. I know people don't want to believe that, but they do. And Nelson Aguilar is probably the guy along with Jacoby Myers, who's in tier 10. So those are the 2 Patriots wide receivers that I would be buying. But other than that, these are guys that they'll probably be consistent and are probably undervalued in fantasy.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, it's hard for me to not want to move Cole Beasley up. Like if we're looking at the numbers and the targets he should see in the Bills offense, the science would lead you to believe that he should be higher. But I think it's God's will that he's at 69 here.
I mean, he finished as the wide receiver 27 in PPR last year, like a high-end wide receiver 3. And he's being drafted on Underdog as I think he's way higher, right?
He's getting drafted in the 10th, 11th round.
Yeah, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 57. So I mean, he'll 100% outperform that. And I like Cole Beasley. So So shout out to him. I know he's been kind of a big figure, but shit.
He walked into the flames on Twitter. I don't know what he thought was going to happen.
Yeah, but I mean, he put up a 22, a 28, a 27 point game, a 19 point game last year in full PPR. So I mean, he's capable of putting up spike weeks, and he's probably undervalued right now.
Yeah, over the last 2 years, he's guaranteed to give you a monster game on Thanksgiving. So you guys can at least pencil that in.
That's a fact.
Pencil that in on DraftKings ahead of time. James, so you mentioned T.Y. Hilton. Do you want to make the case for him?
I mean, I don't love him, but if he's there at the end of my drafts, like 14th round or whatever, I don't mind grabbing him. I think I looked at I have the notes here, but I looked at Hayden Winks. He posted kind of all this data for Underdog and the teams that made the playoffs and moved on, whatever. But T.Y. Hilton was right there as maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was the strength of schedule last year. That's what I looked at. So it was the last like 3 or 4 weeks of the strength of schedule. T.Y. Hilton was like wide receiver 7 or 8. So he had an awful start to the season, but he kind of came on there. I don't think the Colts are awful. So, but yeah, if you want to take Beasley over Hilton, fine with that. If you want to take Gage over Hilton, fine with that. But I think Hilton still has a little bit there. The Colts are being discounted. Nobody likes Wentz, rightfully so. But in this tier, just like Joey, Nelson Aguilar would be one. They spent the money. I would move him up. Also, Sterling Shepard is just a guy that probably not going to win you leagues because he's going to have an explosive week. But I don't mind him as just kind of a guy that could help you get through some weeks, like as a wide receiver 6, 7, 8 on your team. So.
Yeah, Shepard is the guy in this tier I've ended up with the most of just because of his ADP. I mean, he's going 5, 6 rounds later than Beasley and Gage. Are either of you fans of Gage? He's somebody that I've got way lower than consensus.
Yeah, it's too expensive for me. People are just Julio's gone, so let's move Gage up 4 rounds. Like I'm not going to buy that. So I'd rather go 0 tight end and take Hayden Hurst as the last round guy over Gage where his price is if I'm looking for targets.
yeah, that's fair. I don't have many Gage shares either, and he's going above some of the guys that you have, in the tier above. Like he's going above Gabriel Davis, Aguilar, Henry Ruggs, Bateman. So kind of an expensive price, but somebody has to catch passes in Atlanta, especially if Matt Ryan is throwing the ball 40 plus times. He could see a decent target share, but I feel like he's just going to be the guy that'll get you 6 for 60 or 7 for 55 or 60 yards and get you the 12, 13 points every week, which it is valuable, but not the spike week guy that some may believe that he is.
I mean, if you're drafting Russell Gage over Gabriel Davis, you might as well just PayPal me, whatever you were going to enter into that tournament, to be honest. It'd be a better use of money.
I mean, I don't know. I think Russell Gage will have more targets than Gabe Davis for sure.
Hey, we can take this offline. I'll put however much you want on Gabriel Davis. I'll produce and Gage.
Gage has played 45 career games and has 5 touchdowns. So.
Yeah. Yep. But hey, he has 100 target season in his belt. I don't know if Gabriel Davis will have over 100 targets.
Well, gentlemen, let's close this out with our final tier. These are guys. I mean, God, I've got 27 names in this tier, definitely too many to list. And these are just sort of guys that, I think they're wide receiver 8s or 9s or 10s, depending on the construction you go with. But maybe there's somebody in this range that you believe needs to be in a tier above. Joey, actually, I'll start with you because I've got Darius Slayton here. Is it over for our boy, Godius?
It might be over. I mean,
say it ain't so.
We were drafting him in the 9th, 10th round last year, heavy, and it's just sad to see how far he's fallen. I've drafted a couple shares of him just because of like the skill set that he has, deep threat, and I still think he's going to be on the field. But they went out, drafted Kadarius Toney in the first round, who's going to come in and compete for touches. Went out, signed Kenny Galladay, who's that alpha wide receiver 1 that you want. So it's probably GG for Darius Slayton, and it was a good run. Maybe he leaves New York's in the couple seasons, and we can go back to him, but it's over. It's over.
In terms of bit equity, I've drafted a ton of him. He's still one of my highest owned players just because I'm like, if I do ship one of these best ball tournaments, I want Slayton on my roster just to say I never gave up. James, who stands out to you in this tier of wide receiver 8s or above?
There's a lot of names I like here. So I like Valdez Scantling. I feel like he had a good end of the season. He had decent playoff. Yeah, they drafted Amari Rogers. Is that who they drafted?
Yep.
I still think he's the wide receiver 2 in Green Bay. So he's pretty much always there at the end of drafts, the last round. So I don't mind him. Jacoby Myers. Yeah, I think he's got some equity and just. I mean, somebody has to catch passes in New England. What other names do I like? I think these last rounds, you do want to target those wide receivers. You just saw what Claypool was last year was a 17th, 18th round pick, and sometimes he wasn't even drafted in drafts. Same with T. Higgins. So there's going to be a couple of these rookie wide receivers that are going to produce for you. So you just kind of have to figure which one it is. So I kind of like Nico Collins just because Houston's so bad. We can't really can't trust Brandon Cooks. So I still like Brandon Cooks, but yeah, Collins could be a guy. I love Van Jefferson. I think he is being underdrafted. He's one of my flyers. My latest for this month is Van Jefferson, so I'm all over him. Keelan Cole, yeah, he's getting talked up. I think another name that's under the radar still, some people are on, is Marquise Callaway. So just like we talked about Michael Thomas, not a lot of competition, but if Callaway, he could break out, he could get more targets, he could be a factor. So I think he's a little cheap. KJ Hamler, I don't mind, but again, we're in Denver. Brian Edwards, I'm going to take some shots on Raiders. So I'd rather take Brian Edwards than Renfro. So I'm kind of on Ruggs and Edwards. Those are the Vegas guys. Obviously, you have Darren Waller. That is the guy. So if you don't believe in any of these Raiders receivers, Darren Waller should be like a first-round pick for you. So
yeah.
And to close out, a couple other guys like Josh Reynolds, I don't mind. I think since Julio went there, people are just like, he's garbage, nothing. But yeah, he dropped 5-6 rounds just because of that news. Dynamic Brown, yeah, maybe take a shot with him with Washington. So,
Joey?
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of the guys that James mentioned, and just from like a roster construction point, at the end of drafts, I am definitely targeting wide receivers, and I'm targeting some of these guys if I draft their quarterbacks. Like I want that stack in the 18th, 19th, 20th round on drafters with some of these guys. So, if I go ahead and draft Daniel Jones, in the 12th, I'm looking for Darius Slayton. If I get Cam Newton, I know he's going late, but I'm looking at Jacoby Myers and just for that, like Russell Wilson, Dwayne Eskridge. That's kind of how I'm correlating it. And for me, that's kind of like the most optimal strategy in the late rounds because we know wide receivers have, the highest ceiling, the highest range of outcomes out of every position in fantasy. So I like a lot of these guys. If there's one guy that I think should be in a tier or two above is probably Sammy Watkins, just because I feel like he's in the same boat as the other Ravens wide receivers, which you have like 3 tiers or 4 tiers higher, and Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman. Like, I'd probably rather have Sammy Watkins in the 19th round than Bateman in the 10th round, or wherever he's going, just because I want the proven veteran asset. He's having a great training camp.
Proven?
Yeah, he's shown. I mean, he's shown that he can go out there, contribute. I know he had a down year last year, but and he's been a bust. But I'm still willing to bet on his talent and the Ravens offense. So that's just one player that I feel like is a little too low. But just in terms of ADP, I mean, everybody's consensus like lower than market on Sammy Watkins.
Yeah,
So.
no, I agree thoroughly with that take. And I mean, reports are pretty flowery about him coming out of Ravens camp. They're saying that he's been one of the most impressive players on the offense. So in terms of ADP, if you're going to talk about Sammy Watkins in the 18th versus Bateman Hollywood in the top 10 rounds, I'm going Sammy 10 out of 10 times. So I definitely agree with that take. I'll just close off with the 3 players that I'm drafting the most in this range. It's MVS, like James said, he closed out really well and should be the Packers wide receiver 2. Like Joey and I both said, we think it should be Aaron Rodgers. So I think he's a value right now. Dwayne Eskridge is a guy that I think sort of fits the mold that James was talking about rookie wide receivers with good draft capital that are going completely underlooked, like T. Higgins and Claypool were last year. He went in the second round. Last time Seattle drafted a second round wide receiver, his name was DK Metcalf, and he's in the top 5 now. And there's room for targets, especially if we aren't super bullish on Tyler Lockett replicating what happened last year, which I know neither of us are. And the third player that I've really been coming around to lately is Byron Pringle. Now, maybe he's nothing, or maybe he's something. Maybe he's the third option in KC because, Mecole Hardman hasn't really been it up to this point. So, just with the Mahomes factor, the attachment to Patrick Mahomes, I think he's worth taking a shot on. And his ADP has been steadily rising as well. He was going in the 20th round of, 20 round drafts a couple weeks ago. And now I'm seeing him in the 16th, 17th.
Yeah. I like Byron Pringle for sure, and I also like Eskridge a lot too, especially if you can get him in the 19th, 20th round. And I just want wide receivers that are attached to great offenses. If you're not stacking, I'm taking the shots on Byron Pringle, Dwayne Eskridge, and some of these other guys, Emmanuel Sanders, that are attached to great quarterbacks, high flying offenses, and I think that's definitely the right way to go. So. And just one more thing with Eskridge. I mean, the Seahawks only had 3 picks in the draft, and he was their first pick in the second round. So I think he's going to come in. He's going to play right away on 3 wide receiver sets. And there is also a lot of flowery pieces on the Seahawks. New offensive coordinator changing how the Seahawks have been playing their offense over the last couple of years. Maybe trending more towards a pass-heavy offense rather than a run-heavy offense.
That would be a beautiful thing to see. All right, James, final gem. Can you give us just any insight that you have as to how we should be going after the wide receiver position as a whole in 2021 best ball tournaments?
I don't know if a gem, but I just think just be consistent. Kind of look at the news, kind of look at ADP, move guys up and down, look at your ownership. There's a lot of guys that are very similar situations. So I don't think you need to go 40% on a player. So there's going to be, if you go 40% on a player, there's probably 5 other players that are very similar, maybe even some value in them. So you split that 40% out, 10% each or however you want to do it. And I think wide receiver builds, you're building, I don't know if we're talking best ball or redraft or whatever in general, but you want to have a good core. You want them to be your key. It seems like people are building 10 wide receiver teams. I don't necessarily think you have to do that. I think you want a little bit more balance, but getting that balance, I don't mind spending a little extra in those middle rounds on wide receivers and maybe kind of letting quarterbacks fall a little bit. I'm finding value a lot in that position. So that's kind of how I'm building my wide receivers, kind of take them a little bit earlier than people are instead of loading up, wide receiver 6 on with just like a bunch of flyers. So I'm trying to get like my wide receiver 6, 7, and even wide receiver 8 they're a little bit higher in these tiers and sacrificing quarterback a little bit. But also, tight end. So I kind of sacrifice there as well. So you have to you can't be perfect in every position. So you're just trying to build whatever works with how comfortable you are with sacrificing in a certain spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very valid. And gentlemen, that is going to be it for episode 148 of the DFS Dose podcast. If you are not already, make sure you're following us on Twitter at the DFS Dose. I am at Ben Hauver. Joey is at Joey Carrion DFS. And of course, you can find James at James Brimacombe on Twitter. James, do you want to tell the good people where they can find your content?
I have a I'm writing right now for Football Guys. I have been there for a while, so I'll get some more rankings up there, updated here shortly. Also, I'm on Best Ball Rankings, kind of started my own thing, but look for that next year to really kind of take off. So that's where I'm at.
Make sure you guys check out James' stuff. He is one of the sharpest, highest volume best ball players out there. James, thank you for joining the show once again.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely, guys. If you're out there listening, just know we appreciate you. We value you. Until next time, let's stay accountable and keep it authentic. Vibes.